Hey there, John Taylor, President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, and I welcome you to another edition of Chamber Chat. And today's focus for our conversation is going to be on homelessness. Homelessness that impacts our business community, but obviously also has an interest and a major concern we have for those who are unhoused in our community. And how do we address their needs? And no better folks to be having that conversation with than Michael Block, who is the CEO at All Roads, which is formerly our Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. We have Megan Newton, who is the Policy Advisor on Homelessness, or Homelessness Policy Advisor. And then we have Jonathan Singer, who's the Senior Director of Policy Programs for the Boulder Chamber and our lead in addressing homelessness response at the Boulder Chamber. So I welcome all of you to Chamber Chat. Important conversation, a chance to update ourselves on what's happening in the homelessness arena in the effort to address conditions associated with homelessness. And I'm just going to start by asking the three of you, if you can just tell from your perspective, what is the current trajectory of homelessness in our community, individuals who are unhoused, and the impacts that it's having on our community. Any thoughts, Mike? Kick us off.
I always feel like I'm really appreciative of the generous community that we live in, and that we're given resources and tools that don't overcome scarcity in terms of dealing with the problem, but certainly should make other communities blush. And I think it's a really, really awesome reflection on what kind of community this is. And with that said, I think that it's evidenced in our ability to react to homelessness in recent years that did not exist previously, and we're doing a great job of distributing those resources, being effective with those resources, and helping people not only meet their basic needs on a moment-to-moment basis, but also trying to find solutions. And in whatever aspect or whatever intervention we can provide that results in someone finding a home. And so I think the proof's in the pudding. You know, we help far more people on a daily basis. We help far more people on an annual basis. And most importantly, in our North Star, we're helping more and more and more people find exits out of homelessness that are sustainable, which of course is ultimately the solutions we're looking for. Yeah. So, you know, I feel generous. I feel really grateful about that, and I think the results are also in some of the numbers that we see. You know, we see a consistent increase in homeless counts throughout the region, but we've been basically flat over the last 9 years or so here in Boulder County, and even a little decrease in the homeless numbers. And so we should congratulate ourselves for that. That's significant, because when you're seeing upwards of 30% increases in other communities that are arguably generous too, and doing more than their share, and we see that we're flat, we must be doing something right. So yeah, I feel pretty optimistic, and I feel very appreciative of the tools that we've been given to address it.
It's beautiful, beautiful. A testament to our community's investment in addressing the challenge and positive outcomes from that work. Megan, what are you seeing?
I would echo a lot of what Mike just said. Like, I mean, we are seeing results. I will say one of the things I've always said about Boulder versus other places, because I've done this work in different places, is for the size of the community, it is very systematic. Like, we have all the pieces of large city, even though we might not have the numbers of a large city. So I think that's why we can see the impact in a large city. The numbers are so big, it's hard to see the impact. Sure. In other smaller communities, they don't have a system quite set up to respond like we do. And so we kind of have those two pieces put together that I do think is it's not totally unique, but pretty unique in Boulder as far as our response to this issue.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I'll double down on that. I mean, I think that a lot of the energy I get from folks in the community who aren't as sort of well versed in the subject is that we don't appear to have a system. No one has a plan. And I really want to sort of suggest that nothing could be farther from the truth. The depth of expertise, the depth of dedication, and the amount of thought and effort that is put into creating the network of providers and a really system approach to addressing the issue based on data, based on best outcomes, based on evidence, is quite remarkable here. And I think because of the tightness of the community, not only in the city, but also in the county, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's a phone call away. Really, really impactful and influential people are just a phone call away.
Yeah.
And that also allows us, those relationships and the sort of the connective tissue between important relations so short allows us to really be super responsive here. So I think it's a big advantage.
It's exciting to see the impacts or to see the benefits of our work and in this microcosm that's dealing with the challenge that's ubiquitous. Well, let me ask you, Jonathan, what are you seeing from the business side of the equation?
Yeah, well, and I will try not to use big words like microcosm and ubiquitous as best as
I had this
possible.
right here.
I can't even pronounce them. But in all seriousness, this is a workforce issue. This is a public safety issue. This is an issue about our viability as a community to continue to create the narrative that has always been true, that we are an attractive, welcoming place for everybody.
Yep.
And that is what brought Sundance here.
Mm-hmm.
That is what has brought and kept the technology industry here. And from a business perspective, what we're seeing now is community partners, in a lot of ways, doing more, sometimes with more and sometimes with less, right? And that kind of efficiency, when we talk about what is arguably the biggest question, which is the preservation of human life, is really impressive to see.
Yeah.
And has really set a great tone. Not to say that we're not about to face some big headwinds.
Yep.
But I think we might get into that in some other questions. I don't know.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Well, let me hit Megan with a specific question related to the city's approach. So last year, they conducted what was called the clutch report or analysis, and wondering after that review of our homelessness policy and their recommendations, how has the city adjusted its approach to addressing homelessness?
Sure. I think it's twofold. I think we heard that the system we have in place is a good foundation. Like we do have a lot of the pieces that they suggested. I think the two things that I took from the clutch report was one, the focus. It's very targeted on decreasing eliminating unsheltered or what I called rough sleeping, as well as reducing long stays in the system. So folks who come in and they just get stuck like for years and years and years. And so being able to use our resources and really focus on those two populations, I think has changed the conversation for us as far as within the city and what we want to focus on. So some of the things would be focusing on high utilizers, oftentimes are the ones who've gotten stuck and making those resources a priority, as well as the unsheltered homelessness and some people that come in, float out, but being able to target those folks to move people through quicker. So I think we have the good thing, like I said before, is the Boulder has the pieces, the base, right?
Yep.
It's about growing it, it's about focusing it on specific populations that they think would have the greatest impact.
Great. Well, speaking of approaches to homelessness, I know that the homeless shelter, All Roads, has taken on a couple of relatively new elements of the strategy. One is the Day Services Center, as well as a bigger role in permanently supportive housing. But yet I know you're also facing some, as Jonathan alluded to, some major financial headwinds. Just so wondering how you're balancing that and how you're adjusting to those conditions.
Well, from a sheltering point of view, what we're able to provide in our facility on North Broadway, I think that basically the city and the county and some other partners have collaborated to be able to make sure that we're able to provide services reliably. And they should be congratulated for that, and they've risen to the occasion. In terms of day services in particular, which we do 5 days a week, that really was an initiative that was from the city, and again, they should really get a lot of support. And what it allows us to do is really turn the facility more from a basic needs facility to an engagement facility. So you're doing more of both, essentially. Because you're not asking people to leave. You're able to sort of lower the temperature in general for people. You don't have to pack up every morning at 8 o'clock after eating breakfast and wonder what they're going to do now, regardless of the weather, regardless of if it's hot or whether it's cold or whether it's windy and I can relax, I can engage, I can meet my basic needs, and we can try to leverage that into progress, into increasing well-being, and hopefully, of course, ending homelessness. So, we feel fairly secure in the availability of funding for those programs, certainly in 2026. 2027, I think, is a bit of a mystery for everybody. And I don't want to downplay the challenges that all roads in the city and the county are going to face in terms of balancing our needs, the needs of the homeless, in terms of the physical challenges that they face.
Yeah.
So we'll take that seriously, and we're going to do whatever we need to do in order to make sure that we find that narrow gap to walk in order to make sure we're meeting people's needs. Those who have the very least.
Yeah.
Let's remember. Housing programs are a little bit of a different beast in terms of how they're funded.
Yep.
And we've been remarkably successful again with partners like the city and the county, but also the state, in bringing more resources to the permanent supportive housing landscape. These are housing resources that are really focused on those, whenever possible, with the highest acuity of need. We're having the biggest impact on the community, but also homelessness is having the biggest impact on that. Trying to get them housed, trying to get them stable, and trying to bring wraparound supports to them. Funding those programs on an ongoing basis operationally is very difficult. And it may be my biggest challenge in terms of trying to find reliable funding sources in order to stabilize those programs. And I just want to really emphasize that those are the programs that allow us to provide a basis of service for those who we are most concerned about, those with the highest acuity of mental health needs, the ones who are struggling the most with substance abuse, the ones who are rotating in and out of the emergency room and in and out of the justice system. This is the basic tool. These are the boots that you can pull yourself up with, is that housing. And so that's sort of priority number one for us at All Roads in terms of making sure that we are trying to face the sort of fiscal challenge of making sure those programs are stable. And so how it intersects with the challenges that we face right now, it's a very, very strange time to be CEO of an organization like All Roads. And what I mean by that is the federal government has mostly been about bluster so far in terms of how it directly affects our ability to deliver services. There have been lots of threats, and most of those threats have been pulled back. That is not true in the area of healthcare, that is not true in the area of food assistance, but it is true in the area of homelessness and housing assistance. And so that's a good thing. It leaves us nervous on a constant basis, but at least for today, it is a good thing. I think the biggest challenge that we face is that all of our most steadfast and reliable and generous partners at the state, at the county, at the city are all facing fiscal uncertainty. And so what that means for 2027 and what that means for 2028 is basically in conversation right now, or we're heading right into those conversations in real time, because we can only live within our means.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, can there be some sort of bright spot about this? We are always used to dealing with scarcity. We are always used to managing scarcity. When you are challenged in this way, you start to, how do we get leaner? How do we get more innovative? How do we try to sort of squeeze more juice out of the lemon, right? And that is a very, very real-time conversation too, and to making sure that we're really being as effective as we possibly can. So we meet the needs that remain constant or get even larger.
Yeah. So consistent with the sort of innovative entrepreneurial nature of Boulder is to have that opportunity to review the programming and think about how do we deliver services more efficiently, more effectively, is what you're saying.
I mean, I think that it might benefit the folks who are viewing this to know that people like Megan and I get together and really we make hard decisions about what to not fund.
Yeah.
And we make hard decisions based on what does our system need, what do our clients need, how do we create continuity, and within that framework, maybe we don't need to spend money here. That's a very difficult thing. That means that the people who are being served over here will not have that service, and the people who are delivering that service may not have a job. But it is our unfortunate responsibility, especially in this day and age, that we have to sharpen our pencils and we have to be responsible to fiscal realities. And we have to do that in a way that is the least impactful as possible.
Well, Jonathan, maybe turn the question to you.
Yeah.
Boulder Chamber, major focus on homelessness and the impacts on business, and trying to address the needs of our unhoused population through the Boulder Together program.
Right. Well, and this is huge. And I think the question that oftentimes when we're sitting in this room, talking with our community affairs council, talking with folks at Boulder Together, if it's not the first question, it's certainly the one in the back of our mind. What's the best return on investment?
Yeah.
Right. Show me how we can get the best bang for our buck. And what we've seen through that Boulder Together initiative and our homeless policy framework is a three-pronged approach that looks at, one, making sure that we are able to enforce the laws that are on the books when it comes to public safety. Two, ensuring that there's enough housing available for people who are unhoused today, while recognizing, three, that the supportive services that need to maintain people in those housing don't exist to the degree that they are needed. And so if we go back to number one, we are housing people today, right? It's just oftentimes, too many times, it's in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it's $40,000 to $60,000 a year to house someone in jail who might have been better served before it got to a criminal element with supportive housing services. And so when you talk about doing more with less, this is where the state needs to get flexible with things, where we need to get creative and innovative.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're prioritizing through Boulder Together, is these innovative practices that focus on prioritizing, ensuring that the people who live in our community are housed, supported in a way that provides for their well-being and does the right thing for the public as well.
And you guys have been great partners with us in thinking through the strategies that we're trying to advocate for. So, well, just thinking about then those headwinds that are coming, but then also resources that we've advanced as a region, as a county. In particular, we passed the housing tax in 2024. We also passed the mental health tax in 2025. Each with an element relationship to addressing the needs of our unhoused and the population and the homelessness challenge. And so just wondering, what have you two seen, Jonathan, yourself as well, in terms of benefits from that, but also what do you hope to see going forward in the future? Thank you.
I think it's a little too early to tell on some of it.
Yeah.
I think with the behavioral health tax, I think our hope is to see what Jonathan just said, to have those appropriate supportive services be funded and be there. It kind of goes back to what Mike said with the permanent supportive housing and keeping those supportive services. We see too many times that folks get housed and then that's a hard transition,
Sure.
and things start to spiral and those services are not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can build those up, make sure that those are available in the community, as well as the treatment services in general, right? Like we have the conversation regularly as a nation now at this point, housing versus treatment, and it is both. I think most people would agree it's both, right? Like people do need treatment, they do need help with their behavioral health and their substance use. They also need a place to call home, and a home base. Like the number of times that we've seen folks exit the jail actually stable or exit hospital actually stable and end up right back in the park, just to see us do it all over again just feels there's got to be a better way, right?
Yeah.
And so both things, I think, with these taxes is the hope is that obviously there's still a scarcity. Can we do everything? Probably not, but I hope there is enough that we can make a dent in some of these issues that we talk about all the time.
Love it. Michael, what do you think, perspective from you?
Well, I mean, I think that the funding generated by the affordable and attainable housing tax is being distributed, and housing and durable housing assets are a pillar of how we address homelessness. So anything that makes our landscape more robust in terms of the availability of affordable housing is helpful to the system that we're trying to build back.
Okay.
And so we're thankful for that. The mental health ballot initiative that passed, I think is just another opportunity for us to achieve exactly what Megan was speaking to. I think that there's really, from how this intersects with housing and homeless services in terms of trying to impact severe and persistent mental health conditions is really twofold in a sense. The existence of those pathologies prevent a person from being stable, from getting their basic needs. So the house provides an intervention that reduces the impacts of those persistent pathologies and how that can affect their well-being. And also how it puts that person and those behavioral issues and those impacts right in front of the community.
Yeah.
So the first thing a housing response does to a person who's really suffering with severe impairments is it reduces the impacts on the individual and on the community. The second thing it does is it provides a platform for treatment. It provides a platform for engagement, right? I mean, I just want to remind everybody that 99.9% of all pathologies are pursued with people who are in housing, right? And so think about what housing gives to you every day in your ability to pursue any treatment, right? That's what we want to give to the folks who have these really severe and persistent pathologies. And so investments in housing and investments in supportive services is really, really critical if we want to sort of tackle the intersection of homelessness and these severe mental health conditions. And so that's our message, and we're looking forward to continuing conversations around how those funds get distributed.
Yeah.
But we're really quite committed to this notion that that housing is really fundamental, and these then follow-up wraparound services help us tremendously on an individual level and as a community level.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you two is that the combination of these two taxes and the resources that they make available could be a great recipe for support of addressing our needs of our unhoused population. So Jonathan, maybe just your own perspective on how these taxes have rolled out and what we'd like to see.
Well, I think just to zoom out for a second, I mean, if I was to draw a bullseye on our country right now and just say, like, what would make Boulder, Colorado a target for good or bad? Right now, we've got I-25 going north-south and I-70 going east-west, right? And so we have commerce and crime that like to travel along those thoroughfares. And so that creates a unique challenge for our community. We're doing more with less. But now what we need is the community engagement process. We need to get, the business community came out and supported two taxes. They said, raise our taxes. Not every business community does that. So now we need not just the transparency and accountability, but the engagement on the front end. We helped soften the ground or lay the foundation, depending on how you look at it, by saying in that ballot initiative that we're going to focus on homelessness.
Yeah.
And in the previous ballot initiative, talking about permanent supportive housing, which might be one of those words we have to take out is the word permanent now, depending on what HUD wants, but at least supportive housing, right? And so we have this almost golden opportunity right now to say, let's define what that engagement process looks like so we can get the money out there expeditiously. And then that mental health tax goes away. In 2.5 years, it's done. And so the last thing that I'll say about this, I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say around this, is I think we need a gap analysis on, especially as it relates to serious mental illness and addiction, to be able to serve our community in the best way possible and most efficient way possible. So, I know we're talking about looking at private capital for something like that, but something outside the system that can look into it, similar to the Clutch report, where we can describe what are the needs. And so when we get to year 3, we can see where the investments need to be to provide some assurances to the taxpayers.
Well, I mean, I think all of that makes sense, but I also think that, again, we face this opportunity, and maybe I'll be too Pollyanna about it, because again, the generosity of this community, and I think that we have to be a little patient and generous with ourselves. This is something new, and that the sciences around behavioral health are fairly soft, and therefore the metrics are also fairly soft. And I think that we should congratulate ourselves for this opportunity that's been presented to us, essentially by a handful of courageous electeds, and they should be commended, especially at the county and the county commissioners, for putting this forward and providing this opportunity for us. We have to do the best with the money we can. And I think that, I think we also just need to be, we need to have a generous spirit around this and allow us to sort of make sure and look at all the current evidence for sure, but also a gap analysis would be a great idea. And I'd love to participate, at least from the perspective that I can share. I'm not a mental health provider or clinician.
Right.
And so,
Right.
but I do think that it has to be also within the context that we are reacting fairly uniquely. And that until the gap analysis is really rolled out on a statewide level or even a regional level, that it's really hard to imagine a time when the sort of the breadth of the resources that are really required to have a really robust, sort of boots on the ground response is really at a regional or a state level as opposed to a uniquely Boulder level. So that headwind is something that we have to navigate while we're dealing with the available resources that this tax is going to generate. So yes, it gets very complicated very quickly, I guess is the way I think.
Well, and it's a moving target too right now. Looking at you, Megan, too, is like, meth was a game changer, is a game changer. And so nothing exists in its fixed point in time, right? We don't know what the next opportunity or setback is, but.
Right. Yeah. And I would echo something that Mike and I were talking about before this conversation is all resources are good and they do impact somebody. But it is about, gap analysis would be kind of nice because all the time we often are like, well, we need this and we think that's what we're doing and it ends up serving this and these folks still are without resources. So it is an interesting conversation that I think could be very helpful. Yeah. But back to Jonathan, a moving target because what is the issue today may not be the issue a year from now. And so it's hard to do a ton of planning with that kind of situation.
Job security, something like that. So, Michael, you mentioned regional nature of the challenge and to fully capture the breadth of the needs that we have. And Jonathan, you talked about the sort of the transportation routes that provide access in and out of our community for crime, for homelessness, et cetera, for commerce. I guess I reflect on the Clutch report, and they talked about the challenge that Boulder faces as a community that sees a large inflow of homeless population, of unhoused individuals, and thinking about how do we get a handle on our homelessness issues. Just wondering, just any perspective that you would offer on behalf of the Boulder Chamber, and sort of the Clutch report's suggestion that we move toward a more diversion and focus for that, addressing that inflow.
Diversion sounds like it's key. Speaking of moving targets, this is in our culture, our community is unique in that regard. And so one of the interesting things is, if you talk to somebody, I'll just make it even local. If you talk to somebody in Longmont who's unhoused and you say, look, we'd love to help you out. Here's a bus token. We're going to send you to All Roads. They're going to say no, actually. They're going to say, I belong in Longmont, right? And that's not to pick on Longmont at all. And so if we can find ways to make sure that the people who are here, who have connections to the community here, get the prioritization, that's going to strengthen those community connections and provide for a more stable environment. And for the people who are coming through here for whatever reason, the weather is slightly better, people think there's more job opportunities, whatever it is diverting them in ways that will provide them the best supports possible, because our community may not be the best because you have family somewhere else, you have job opportunities somewhere else, you have a connection to wherever that somewhere else is. And so that's what we're working on right now, and that's what we're supporting through the Clutch report to our city council, to our county, to say these are the ways that we can provide the best and highest use of limited resources.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you too, how does this diversion tactic or strategy show up in your work?
Well, I think what the Clutch report highlights is that there's a unique, and what you're speaking to more specifically is that there's a unique dynamic in the city of Boulder and in Boulder County, where a high percentage of folks are reporting to us that they became homeless somewhere else and keep people with their
Yeah.
And that really presents very difficult challenges for us in the sense that we have scarce resources. And I think everyone's goal, of course, is essentially the reduction of the homelessness of adults in Boulder County. And so if that is our collective goal, and I can assure you that is one of our strategic priorities at All Roads, that is one of the strategic priorities that's been reaffirmed by our board of directors. And so we feel like we're a community resource. We feel we were founded by the community. We feel like we're supported by local tax dollars and supported by the community. And so we should be accountable to metrics that represent community need, like reducing the census of homelessness. So we're starting to take that more and more seriously. But I can't tell you exactly what that looks like. But I think ultimately we are wrestling about whether or not we have an obligation to serve folks who are identifiably from our community first. And will that have an impact in how we distribute resources? And will it have an impact in our ability to create more diversions out of Boulder once people get here? And I think ultimately what we need to do, of course, is that the exits from homelessness, out of homelessness, and maybe even geographically out of Boulder, have to exceed the system inputs, or we will not see a reduction in that homelessness. And so I can't identify exactly what our approach is going to be in this moment, but that is something that we are dedicated to wrestling with. And we, of course, don't control all the levers as to why someone might choose to come to Boulder homeless, but we probably do control some of those levers. And we do feel an obligation to make sure that community-based metrics in how we measure or not whether we're being successful or not is something that we have prioritized and we're going to prioritize more and keep a closer eye on.
And I think the clutch report, to take it on an individual level as well, not just the community level, like I said, change the conversation. Bringing someone into Boulder with welcoming, and of course that's what we want to do, but telling them that we can solve, yes, we've got it, you just sit tight, is not real, right? Yeah. Like being honest with folks about what's available and what they thought is here may not be what is really here. Yeah. And those conversations that folks are having, outreach workers are having, or the shelter workers are having, it's just a real, true, honest conversation with folks that helps them, the individual, because them sitting in a shelter or sitting out in the park for an undetermined amount of time isn't good for them either, right? Yeah. We want to solve their homelessness, and that might be a conversation that's a little bit more nuanced than here's an apartment.
Yeah. Or here's a temporary services, but we can't meet your needs continuously.
I mean, I think there are ways to wrestle with this that sort of intersect pragmatism with sort of a different lens and compassion too, because I mean, right now we spend a lot of resources on managing the impacts of homelessness in our community. We spend them in the emergency room, we spend them in the justice system, we certainly spend them in camping cleanups. I don't think anybody would suggest that any of those efforts to manage the problem, all those millions of dollars that we spend almost $4 million a year in cleaning up encampments, right? No one's suggesting that that's money well spent if we're talking about improving the lives of individuals experiencing homelessness. It's a management tool that we feel is necessary in terms of the vitality and of the community. And so we all want to see that money redirected in ways that actually increase people's well-being. Well, how do we actually get there? Yeah, right. You just can't pull the management tool away and then have an unmanageable situation. So just imagine a time if we could actually consistently reduce the census of homelessness in Boulder to a point where we can reinvest those management dollars into solution dollars. Then we can be a more generous community. Then we can have a bigger impact on people. And we can take care of the responsibility we do take and have better answers for people. And so that's the goal for me in terms of wrestling with the inconvenient data that the clutch report revealed in terms of the amount of people coming into our community and whether we can mitigate those impacts.
And we're back. And I have one final question for our panelists in this now new virtual setting. And that is the closing question for you. If you were to say 2 to 3 years from now, Just wondering, what is your vision for success in addressing the needs of our unhoused population and the impacts of homelessness on our business community? And what would be the challenges that are to achieving that success, as well as the opportunities that you see for advancing towards our goals? And I'll just ask Michael, maybe if you don't mind just kicking us off.
Well, I mean, I think all the uncertainty that we're facing really reduces, our lens to pretty short-term framework. So I think it's a very important question because we really can get lost in sort of the moment-to-moment sort of information coming, especially coming out of the federal government, and how impactful that can seem, and then they pull back and it can really be disruptive. I think we can all assume that the fiscal challenges that our partners face, the city, the county, the state, are going to continue. So the most proximate challenge is really working with our partners to be and still deserve to deliver this level of service that we think our clients deserve and that our community expects. And that's gonna take some pain, I think. And I think it's going to require us to ask more of the community, maybe of folks who haven't yet decided to support our efforts. And so that's our biggest challenge. I think everybody has to remember that it's a process that creates ongoing exits from homelessness, and that we can continue to achieve that, and we will continue to provide opportunities for people to exit homelessness. But we have to be really, really sort of attentive to this balance and trying to find the tipping point where we're creating more exits ultimately than we are having inputs into our system. And I think that that's something that our organization is going to lean into. And I think the community can expect some more information from us, how we plan to do that, because we can't just simply consider our responsibility is to create an exit for everybody who's homeless on our streets, especially if that homelessness is originating from a different community or even a different state. So we have to really, I think, take on that difficult challenge of having those conversations. We're doing that internally now, and we're doing that as a board, an all roads board conversation. We're doing that through our strategic planning. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with in order to really realize the opportunity to reduce the census in the next couple of years, and really aspire to, despite the financial challenges that we're facing, to really find a way to leverage our generosity and ultimately make sure the community is feeling the impact of our work by a reduced census of homelessness on our streets.
Yeah, got it. So in essence, framing the scope of the challenge and allowing us to better see the success of the work in that focused way.
Well, I think one way to really focus it is to really, I think, universally have consensus over what the primary metric is.
Mm.
And perhaps the primary metric should be, are we reducing the census of homelessness in our community? And that translates to more people being helped. And that translates to the people who support our work feeling as though that investment has a return. Has a return for them, has a return for the individuals they care about, and has a return for the community. And so that's really, I think, an important sort of conversation that we need as a community to really sort of push forward and focus that conversation about what are we actually trying to achieve, and can we universally just decide this really is our metric. And it may be really hard to achieve that, and a lot of the factors that contribute to how many people are experiencing homelessness is a lot beyond our control. But just because the challenge is hard doesn't mean we shouldn't take it on. So that's where I'd love to see us go.
Gotcha. Well, Megan, for you in the city, well, what is it? What does 2 to 3 years of success look like?
Yeah, I think Mike said it well. Like over the next 2 or 3 years, I think success, we're really looking for shorter periods of homelessness and a reduction of the unsheltered population that folks see outside every day.
Yeah.
I think the big barrier to that, or the gap, is that the needs outweigh the resources right now. And that's always the conversation around where do we want to prioritize resources when we aren't able to help everyone. And so I think that conversation is going to continue. But I think with the updated strategy, that was the whole point, as to where do we need to focus these resources in order to make the biggest impact. And so I think that is what we'll be looking at and moving forward with in the next couple years. And I do think, I mean, as far as opportunities go, the coordination has grown. Like, it's always been pretty good, but it's growing. And so I think that's the opportunities that we're going to keep building on, keep having these conversations, having conversations with the community, having conversations with partners, in order to better communicate the work we're doing and, streamline what ultimately is win-win for the community and the folks who are experiencing homelessness. So I think that's the direction we'll be looking to go.
I love it. And I know the chamber looks to continue being a partner, not just with the city, but with the all roads. And so that gives me the opportunity to turn it to my friend Jonathan. Your vision for success, 2 to 3 years, opportunities and challenges along that road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're at a huge inflection point right now, and this is both nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. And we need to meet the moment where it is, and that means engaging the public and talking about what homelessness is, what it can look like, and really, ideally, what you've already heard before. How do we reduce the numbers in the short term in these next couple of years, because this is the work of the possible that's been made more challenging by an environment where the funding is not going to be where it was just a year ago. And so when I think about our Boulder Together initiatives, we have so many different pillars, right? We're trying to find a way to fill commercial vacancies, provide more opportunities in our workforce environment to fill those vacant jobs, ensure public safety, and at the same time reduce homelessness. And all of these things operate in an ecosystem together. And the more that we can talk about that, to be able to talk to our people who own commercial spaces that are vacant right now, to say, what is it that we can do to utilize those spaces in a better way, providing the workforce that we need to provide to fill those spots, to activate those spots, to energize those spots. When you give people more work in general, you see reductions in crime and you see reductions in homelessness. And so none of this is a perfect one-to-one formula. But if we can get some of the actors in these other spaces to understand that ecosystem and that interconnectivity, we can actually create a more ingenuitive, stronger system that will be able to withstand better the different political influxes that we're seeing right now. So it's not only a reduction, but it's also ideally building a stronger community with new actors that haven't ever participated in this space, to give them a sense of agency and control over a major economic and human issue.
Beautiful. Well, listen, I look forward to seeing and experiencing that vision with all of you, because I know we'll be working together through that period. And I thank you all for being with us both virtually and in person for this really important conversation. Megan Newton with the City of Boulder, Michael Block at All Roads, and then my partner at the Chamber, Jonathan Singer. Thank you all very much for this conversation. And I thank our audience for watching us here at Chamber Chat, and we'll see you next time on Chamber Chat.